Accusations by the mainstream media and some politicians of fake news and the so-called alternative media are all the rage. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, the concern rings a little hollow, mainly because the mainstream media has no intention of extending the focus to themselves. Am I making a generalization? Well, absolutely, and it's justified. With few exceptions, the media's high self-esteem puts them above reproach in their own minds. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the concern over fake news surfaced once the Democrats lost the U.S. presidential election, along with the Senate, the Congress, the governorships, you name it. According to the Democratic Party establishment, fake news is a principal reason why they lost the election, along with Russians, racists, and deplorables. For the life of them, they can't find a legitimate reason why someone wouldn't vote for them. After all, they're the enlightened ones. But the concern over fake news is so blatantly politically motivated and one-sided that it's actually laughable. I mean, it also backfired as the attention turned to the mainstream media itself. And it wasn't hard to find immediate examples of fake news in the mainstream media. Now, before I give you my take on where accuracy and integrity were guaranteed to fall by the wayside and losing the public trust, let me give you an example from the past week. I mentioned this in a business comment earlier. The CBC ran a story that stated, in quotes, "Since the U.S. election of Donald Trump, universities across the country have reported a surge of applications and website traffic from the United States," end of quote. The implication, presented as fact, is obvious. Trump's election caused a record number of people to apply or inquire about attending a Canadian university. The problem is, they literally made that up. They have no data, they have no research that would support that statement. I mean, the correlation might be true, so is the fact that applications increased after the Flames lost 4-2 to Dallas on November 10th, or Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge was released on November 9th. But as every grade 7 student should know, correlation is not causation. Simply put, that's fake news, motivated by the political bias of the reporter, the headline writer, and news director. The politicization of the CBC's law was nothing new. I mean, given that the union that represents the CBC reporters filed to be a third-party participant in the Canadian election in order to oppose Stephen Harper. I still find that outrageous, but it also explains the bias I am consistently seeing in their coverage. But what I find infuriating is that as a taxpayer, I'm paying for it. But it gets to the root of why trust in the media has been steadily declining. I want to be clear. I don't have a survey or poll that probes specifically why people distrust the media, but it's clear the polls have shown that distrust levels continues to rise. But my take is that it was inevitable. As soon as the media became infatuated with politics, and with it they surrendered their journalistic integrity in favor of political spin. So much of what masquerades as sort of so-called political news is nothing but innuendo, speculation, misleading statements, and outright BS. One of the norms is to bring on panelists who represent specific parties, and all they offer up is political spin that's designed to mislead you, the public, and way too often it goes without challenge. As Peggy Noonan, the ace columnist with the Wall Street Journal, observed, we actually now expect our politicians and their representatives to lie. But that doesn't excuse the media for not only going along with it, but facilitating it. Another example from the CBC this week. Peter Mansbridge reported on the unverified, unsubstantiated dossier on Donald Trump, calling the sources highly creditable, which was complete BS. As Dean Beckett, he's the executive editor for the New York Times, said, their paper would not publish the document because the allegations were totally unsubstantiated, in quotes. We, like others, investigated the allegations and haven't corroborated them, and we felt we're not in the business of publishing things we can't stand by, end of quote. Well, the CBC will, at least when it comes to a politician they don't like. I think it's a pretty safe bet that if the name on that dossier was Justin Trudeau and not Trump, they wouldn't have run the story. Now, I'm not letting the New York Times, by the way, off the hook, despite their post-election mea culpa, that now they're going to rededicate themselves to honest journalism, in their words, as opposed to what they were doing before. In August, in a column published on the front page, Jim Rutenberg clearly wrote that journalists should forget aspiring for balance and instead adopt an oppositional approach to Trump. But it's not just Donald Trump. Advocacy journalism has taken over newsrooms in the Western world that has infected virtually every social issue, economics, and especially climate change. Back to the CBC. When Neil Young appeared getting interviewed regarding the oil sands, unbeknownst to the viewers, the interview was edited because of Neil Young's clueless statements about oil from the oil sands polluting China and Beijing in particular. The problem was that no oil from the oil sands actually goes to China. He would have appeared an idiot, which would have diminished his anti-oil sands message so popular at the CBC, so the CBC edited the interview to make him appear more knowledgeable. That's clearly an agenda in operation, and it produced a fake interview. The point is, fake news is inevitable with the mainstream media, along with the politicization of every issue, combined with a progressive groupthink that has more in common with political spin and advocacy than integrity.